Hey guys, I'm Dov, and today I'm back with more Total War Warhammer 2 online action. Today we're back with Golden Boy and the Empire are going to be taking on the foul forces of Chaos, so let's get to the army compositions. Golden Boy, of course, up in the air here. We've just taken Final Transmutation. Sometimes I alternate between taking more of a debuff slash buff focused build or a Lord sniping build with Final Transmutation. This time decided to go with Final Transmutation, and on the other side of the field we've got the Lord of the End Times, who, although he doesn't have any innate magic resistance or regeneration or anything like that, does have quite a bit of HP. So even a couple of overcast Final Transmutations will only do so much damage to Archaon. That being said, let's have a look at the rest of the army. You guys saw in the opener there, the Royal Altdorf Graphites is supported by a Warrior Priest. As you guys well know by now, this is my new favorite thing about the Empire, is buffing up the Royal Altdorf Graphites or Demigryph Knights in general with the new faith buffs from the Warrior Priest and, of course, the Archlector. But yeah, so we've got the single sweeper in the center. We've also got two Reichsguard out to each flank, a single unit of Outriders, and the Hammer of Witches. Front line is going to be 4 units of Spearmen and 3 Greatswords. Gone pretty heavy on the infantry this time. Greatswords with the Faith buffs as well, I find, perform pretty well in a lot of situations. Most people expect you to just bring light state troops anyway in the current meta, so it can be a little bit of an off-meta pick. My opponent, for example, has just brought a line of Chaos Warriors, which on paper are great against the Empire. The only unit they'll struggle against is Greatswords, and thankfully I have enough of them that I can at least contest this infantry fight fairly well. My opponent's also got 2 Dragon Ogres, so some heavy anti-large AP. One of them is the Summoners of Rage, the Regiment of Renown, who also have magic attacks, and of course the Chain Lightning. A couple of Chaos Poison Warhounds to support them, and we also got a single unit of Chaos Knights, sword and board. No lances on these guys. If we look at Archaon's spell loadout here, he's got Flaming Sword of Ruin and Burning Head. Interesting not to have Kindle Flame, though, especially with Flaming Sword of Ruin. You would think you'd want to take as much advantage of that as possible. He does have Slayer of Kings, though, and the Crown of Domination as well, so let's get things rolling, and we can watch what happens here. Hammer of Witch is going to be opening up on the Dragon Ogres first things first, but you know, for being a Regiment of Renown, it is going to whiff every single shot here. In fact, it's been focused on the Summoners of Rage since the beginning, and it still has not landed a single shot on them. So I definitely think that CA needs to look at the accuracy of Empire cannons. They're very accurate against certain types of units. Like if I were shooting at these Chaos Knights, for example, I'd be getting some really good value. But shooting at smaller, like single entity targets, that are still defined as large, the Great Cannon just has a hard time hitting, and especially a Regiment of Renown like this Hammer of Witches, it should be able to hit them, but Reichsguard, kind of charging these Poison Warhounds, decide that's a bad idea and then try and pull back here. We're going to screen out with the Spearmen, but my opponent doing a very good job here using the Hounds against the Spearmen, of course, since the Chaos Poison Warhounds don't count as large, and then just chasing on with the Summoners of Rage. That being said, we're bringing over the Demigryph Knights, just kind of folding up into a more defensive position over on this flank, and we're going to get the infantry engagement going in just a moment here, but my idea is that if we can isolate these guys, you can see Archaon did take 1 Final Transmutation already, did about a quarter of his HP in damage or so, maybe about a fifth. But anyway, we're going to try and isolate these Summoners of Rage and the Hounds that are supporting them from this from these other units here. You can see the Chaos Knights with Lances having to run from the Empire State Troop Spearmen. It looks like they're trying to go after the Hammer Witches, which is, of course, a good target, but the main engagement getting underway here. I'd say main engagement, the critical engagement, certainly, with the Summoners of Rage here taking a charge from the Reichsguard and the Royal Altdorf Graphites, all with the Faith buffs. They're just going to get absolutely put in a trash can, and as strong as the Summoners of Rage are, they're not going to be able to hold up to something like that. Reichsguard also charge out the Chaos Poison Warhound supporting, and then catch these Dragon Ogres in the flank, so the Dragon Ogres now going to get their charge bonus there. Meanwhile, in the center engagement, the Hammer of Sigmar goes off for the Great Swords fighting the Chaos Warriors in this pocket, who they were already beating, but now they're going to beat much more expediently, which is a good thing because a Burning Head goes off and it does a really nice amount of damage to the Great Swords on this side and probably might rat off those Spearmen on the far side. But this pocket as well going very well for Chaos. They're collapsing these Spearmen here and wearing down the Great Swords with the support of Archaon there, that heroic presence. But in terms of my opponent's mobile units, he's suffering pretty badly here. You can see we've caught the Chaos Knights now with the Royal Althorf Griffite squad, and they're going to have a bad day. You can see my opponent desperately trying to pull back away here. The Great Swords have routed off a unit of Chaos Warriors in the center, so they're going to fold around and start to wrap up the other unit in the center here. And yeah, the Chaos Knights, many of them do manage to escape here, but it's not quite going to be enough to keep them alive, unfortunately. I did manage to take out the Hammer of Witches, though, so that in and of itself was pretty decent. This other unit of Dragon Ogres had taken a lot of damage from the Reiksguard, but eventually able to wear them down through sustained combat. The Outriders, though, providing some nice Overwatch fire in that situation as well. They're going to charge into this center pocket and try and support here, but you can see the terror from the Royal Althorf Griffites is an issue for Chaos. Chaos Knights with Lances and these Chaos Warriors getting routed off, leaving these Dragon Ogres to suffer the same fate, more or less, as the Summoners of Rage here, as they get isolated and dragged down by the Demis, Reiksguard, other units. Yeah, it's just going to be a bad day for Dragon Ogres. So as strong as Dragon Ogres are, and I actually quite like my opponent's build here, just getting them isolated like that and dragged down, especially with the Royal Althorf Griffites buffed up with the Hammer of Sigmar, they are a very scary unit. They will tear your face off in a big hurry. So yeah, something to be aware of. Another very nice Burning Head coming down from Archaon. Probably going to rout off those Great Swords? Maybe not, though. With the heroic presence of the Warrior Priest there, it looks like they've stabilized. We did drop the second final transmutation on Archaon. And the other nice thing about Gelt being up in the air here is he's relatively safe, since my opponent didn't bring any Chaos flying units. Chaos doesn't have any flying units that can catch Pegasi anyway. As you guys know, if you watched my top 5 worst monsters video, Manticores are too slow to catch Pegasi, so Gelt can just run around and be relatively safe in that aspect against Chaos. So very well played to my opponent. Hope you guys enjoyed watching that one. All things considered, build worked out more or less as intended. The only thing that really underperformed there was the Hammer of Witches, but it ended up being a nice kind of bait unit that tied down my opponent's Chaos Knights and then let them into a position to be taken out by the Royal Althorf Griffites, who, by the way, absolute MVPs. They're definitely taking the game ball in this match, so to speak, with the Warrior Priest supporting, the double Warrior Priest, in fact, one for the front line and one for the Griffites, and they managed to tear apart the Summoners of Rage. Of course, the Reiksguard on that side supporting as well managed to get an XP Chevron and 42 kills at the end of the day. 92 kills and an XP Chevron on the Great Swords. They all started out with 1, so 2 of them managed to get an XP Chevron through the course of the battle. Outriders didn't get a whole lot of kills, but just providing some nice Overwatch fire, and also being a nice distraction piece as well, kind of pulling those Hounds and the other unit of Dragon Ogres on the opposite flank out of position, which ended up being a really nice, favorable engagement for me. So yeah, for my opponent's build, Archaon's actually not a terrible pick here. With some of the changes that have been implemented in Total War Warhammer 2, he's not as snipeable as he was in Game 1. Granted, I still think that Sigvald or Big Bird are going to be better choices against the Empire, just because Sigvald is pretty much immune to getting gooned. Not entirely, but he's pretty tanky. And of course, Big Bird is going to be tankier against the magic. He doesn't have the regeneration of Sigvald, but he does have magic resistance and missile resistance, of course, as well, which means something like the Hammer of Witches, Silver Bullets are going to do almost nothing. In general, the Empire guns aren't as good against him, so I think that they are potentially, those two are better picks in this matchup. But Archaon's certainly not bad. Managed to get 103 kills with his Burning Heads, and yeah, just probably expecting a little bit of a lighter front line with more of a cavalry focus. And the fact that I had a heavier infantry line, I think, caught my opponent off guard, because obviously if he'd brought like a couple of Chaos Warriors with great weapons, or even like a single Chosen with great weapon, they really could have cut up my infantry line and even those Great Swords pretty well. Chaos Warriors with great weapons will trade more or less even with the Great Swords. It's not great, but you know, it's definitely cost effective. They'll do better against the Sword and Board Chaos Warriors, certainly. Or if my opponent had gone with different lore of magic, rather than bring Archaon, for example, if he had Big Bird with Plague of Rust, he could drop that Plague of Rust on the Great Swords, and then suddenly those Chaos Warriors, the non-armor piercing Chaos Warriors, or even Shielded Chosen as well, which I like quite a bit in this matchup, will do a lot better. they'll trade much more effectively with the great swords. So yeah, just in terms of builds that I like to use, I mean, the Chaos Warriors are pretty decent, so maybe a couple of them would be pretty solid. Let's go to the Chaos Warriors, and we'll set the opponent to the Empire. So yeah, Big Bird and Sigvald are both pretty good. For the sake of this particular build, we're going to go with Sigvald this time, just because I've been playing with him a bit recently, and he seems to be decent despite evidence to the contrary. So we're going to grab Standard Die and, of course, the Auric Armor to give him that regeneration. And I'm actually going to grab Lore of Death here because it has this Soul Blight, minus 30 armor, 25% weapon damage, and an area of effect. The minus 30 armor is really what we're going to be looking for. And Spirit Leech is actually pretty decent against cavalry. Some of you guys had pointed that out to me, and it does manage to pick off a unit model or two, which against a faction like the Empire that can't resurrect unit models, is a very, very useful trait to have, certainly. And especially casting it against the lower model count cavalry like Demigryph Knights, you can get some pretty good value out of Spirit Leech in that situation. It won't pick off the models of the Demigryph Knights, but again, because they have a lower model count, the damage scales a little better, so it's a little more efficient in terms of raw damage. But anyway, we're going to go ahead and take this loadout with the Sorcerer to support. I'm tempted to even take him on foot and just stick him in the infantry blob so that he's not subject to the anti-large bonus of the Demigryph Knights. And then we're going to take a couple of Shielded Chosen just to be a strong frontline presence. And of course, with the Soul Blight, they'll tear apart great swords pretty efficiently. We're also going to grab a couple of Marauder Horsemen with throwing axes just to act as a kind of auxiliary screening force. Summoners of Rage, definitely not a bad idea, although we're going to have to play a little bit more conservatively with them. Chaos Marauders, honestly, not a bad pick in this matchup, just to kind of fill out some extra numbers. They'll trade well against most state troops, and pretty much anything under Flagellants they'll trade pretty cost-effectively with. So, decent to hold out some extra numbers, and also just gives us, you know, bit of extra frontline fighting presence. Not a whole lot, but it's something. And at this point you can go a number of different directions. I don't have any terror causing units, so the Dragon Ogre Shaggoth, we do have the points for that. Might not be a bad idea. Of course, the elite anti-large AP of this guy is very strong, kind of like a mini Kolek, and you know, his terror will be very strong as well. He's a big target though, so we're going to need to protect him. To that point, I think we do actually grab a couple of Chaos Poison Warhounds. I do like that pick for my opponent in case I happen to bring heavy range presence, especially like infantry range presence. The Hounds will be very good there, and we're about 15 points short from where I want to be. So maybe I'll come in here and cut evasion on this guy just to give us the extra points. But something like this I think would be pretty solid. Again, just kind of spitballing here. I have similar builds that use Big Bird and various other things. So let me know what you guys think about that in the comments down below, and about this matchup in general. I find it's actually pretty even with some of the recent buffs to the Empire. They can actually do quite well in this matchup, I find. But let me know your guys' thoughts. Hope you guys enjoyed watching. If you do like this sort of content, be sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell notification button so every time I upload a new video, you'll be notified. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time.